this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll now the hands of our Assistant City Clerk.
This is the pre-meeting of the Mobile City Council, Tuesday, October 1st. We have approval of minutes from September 24th.
Any issues, anyone? Okay.
Appeals, we have requests for waivers of the noise ordinance at 3370 Sheringham Drive on October 19th from 3 p.m. until 9 p.m. and at 22 Hillwood Road on October 12th from 3:30 until 7:30
Mr.
p.m.
President,
Councilman Days.
I'm going to ask that the council deny the one on Sheringham and approve the one on Hillwood. I've talked to the applicant of the one on Sheringham, and applicants received 2 previous waivers this year, and there are some nearby residents who are bitterly opposed to any waivers. And so I'm just going to ask that we deny this.
All right. Madam Clerk.
Presentation of petitions and other communications to the council. Jason Cadulas will thank the city for working with the Leadership Mobile government team to produce Now You Know public service announcements. Bill Boswell and Roy Isbell will offer comments about the Architectural Review Board concerning the construction of a gas station at 900 Government Street. Reggie Hill will speak about the Civic Center, public and affordable housing, public safety, and contracts. Apostle Valenia Green will address citizens' concerns about broken sidewalks and a request for handicap ramps at the corner between Augusta and Hamilton Streets.
Question. Nick, you back there? Yeah. She's going to specifically ask about the corner of Augusta and Hamilton. That's Miss Brown's house. I think I asked for that to be done maybe 9-10 months ago. Is that in the package that we're doing right now, going down Washington Avenue, and also going to do right there Prince Peace at those 4 corners right there? Do you know?
Do you think that fronts Washington would be there? She's the one that's a block off, a couple blocks off. That's in there.
Well, no, there are 2 that are a couple blocks off. The 4 at the corner of Charleston and Lawrence, and the 1 at the corner of Augusta and Hamilton, which we've been talking about now for some time.
Yeah, another one you recently reached out to us. We included that in there. There's a couple other ones that we need to include. We can include that as well.
All right. Well, I'll graciously remind everybody that those are currently in the works and that they can physically see the work being done. It just depends on when we get to it. Thank you.
Madam Clerk.
Consent resolutions held over. 4689 and 690 are declaring the structures at 2106 Gamon Circle North and 1604 Robert E. Lee Street public nuisances and ordering them demolished.
Mr.
Good morning,
Dunbar.
Mr. President. Just a brief update for the 2 items that are held over. The 2106 Gamon Circle, regretfully, we have no action. There's been no action taken on site. This was held over 60 days so that the owner could sell. We've had no contact from the owner, and there's been no on-site repairs or demolition. We would request that this be declared a public nuisance. The second item, the 1604 Robert E. Lee Street, we do have good news here. The owner did hire a demolition contractor, and they're on site now demolishing the structure. So if we could table this permanently, that would be great.
All right, thank you. Madam Clerk.
Resolutions held over. 01919, authorized agreement with Harris Contracting Services for electrical service, upgrade, and generator installation at the Public Works Complex. 01920, authorized agreement with the state of Alabama for participation in the fiscal year 22 state and local cybersecurity grant program. 01932, authorized project development agreement with Mobile County Industrial Park Board of Mobile County and Scannell Properties.
Mr. President,
Mr. Days.
I'm as disappointed as I think the rest of us are that we're dealing with this issue once again.
Yeah, they'll be close to the mic, Mr. Days.
I said I'm disappointed, as I think we all are, that we're dealing with this issue once again, having thought that we had resolved it a while back. But the fact remains that it's a very important project for the city of Mobile. $440 million total development costs. It's a 500-acre business park. It's important to the Port of Mobile. 4,000 new jobs created, and $212 million in annual payroll for employees, $871 million in annual sales, $3.5 million in taxes. So it's an important project. So my intention, there were some issues I had with this latest agreement that's on our agenda. And so I will be offering an amendment. What do we call it? A replacement? Substitution. And that substitution will make it clear that the 22 prohibited uses that were in the prior agreement can now be only used for accessory uses. It clearly defines what an accessory use is and makes those limitations applicable for 20 years. Additional changes that have been agreed to between the administration and Skinnell that really kind of tightens this up. And I'd ask Mr. Bonner to explain that to us.
Yes, happy to. And I agree. It's unfortunate we're dealing with this again, but it is a substantial project. It's a first of its kind project for our region. It's a first of its kind project to get a CSX Platinum designation, which will be happening later this month. It's a first of its kind project to open up rail to the port and for logistics and distribution like this will. So it is a game changer. And that's why we've been working so hard to get this right and to address the concerns that each of you have raised. I know we can't address all of them, but we've attempted to address as many of them as we can. And that includes the revisions, the final revisions, the substitute that we discussed this morning, and that email to the clerk's office just 15 minutes ago to confirm the final revisions. The final substantive revisions to the agreement is to include a requirement with regard to compliance. As you stated in the agreement as amended, the 22 uses that are now prohibited from being primary uses and are allowed as accessory uses are set forth and based on the general terminology used in the UDC. There was not a mechanism in place where we would be able to actually review and approve these uses in advance of an end user or a purchaser moving forward with a project on the site. What the developer has agreed to, you'll see in section 22 of the agreement is a compliance request provision, which will allow the city to have the opportunity to review any request that comes in for a use that might fall under the use restrictions. This will be done so that we can look and know what their desired use is, and so that they will know that they are in compliance. And compliance is a very important piece of this project for the developer. In order for them to secure financing and move forward, et cetera, they're going to have to affirmatively assert that they're in compliance with all agreements, and this is a material agreement for the project. So those are the two revisions to the version that you saw earlier today, along with some typo corrections, a couple capitalizations from parties with a lowercase p to parties with a capital P, and added in some email addresses for the notice provisions. But with that, I'll entertain any questions. I know y'all have been looking at this agreement for a while.
Yeah, let me just, if I can, Mr. President, just wrap up my comments on it. Thank you, Mr. Bonner. So what do we get if we make these changes and enter into this agreement? In addition to the economic benefits I've just mentioned, I want to remind everybody, and I think we all know this, that property out there is currently zoned I-2. Skinnell or anyone else can go in there tomorrow morning and use it for any I-2 purpose they want. So this agreement would limit those uses to ancillary uses. It gives us 150 acres of conservation easement, and it ensures that the part there along the river on the east side is going to be R1. So I think there are tremendous economic and environmental reasons to enter into this agreement. Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect. It's not perfect. But I think on balance, the agreement we're talking about, this amended agreement, is the appropriate course of action. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. Rose.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. President. This agreement that's going to be put before us. So, I mean, the reason we're in the position we are now is because the agreement was not signed. So, I mean, am I understanding that it's being suggested that we do that same silly thing again? We say we all agree, we all shake hands, everybody agrees, we're all patting each other on the back, and then it gets put on our agenda and we pass it and it's not signed again. Then it's wielded against us to whittle the deal down another time.
Unless the administration directs differently, I don't believe this will be back on your agenda again for any other purpose. We have informed the company that, as with all agreements, the city signs last. So once we're in agreement, they will be required to sign first, and then the mayor will execute on behalf of the city consistent with the resolution that you pass hopefully today.
I suggest that we don't pass it, especially if it's not signed. I mean, that just seems wild to me. It's also been discussed, and I think Mr. Daves pointed to it, about these big economic benefits that could possibly come as a result of this. During these negotiations, it's been said or put forward that they're moving forward this project. They're going to close on October 2nd, 3rd, whatever it is, with or without incentive. So it begs the question of why the incentive? I don't understand why we would do incentive at all. If they're going to move forward with the project.
If you want to have any restrictions in place on the project, you will move forward with incentives. If not, they're zoned I2, so every one of the 22 uses, there's 8 of those 22 that they have by right. So they could use any of those, and the other, whatever 8 minus 22 is, the math there, those additional uses, they would be allowed to pursue as either conditional use or special exemption. So one, you're getting the use restrictions, which have been the primary driver in every discussion we've had up until now, is making sure that those uses were limited. Second, you're getting the conservation easement, which originally was going to be 49 acres in the first agreement, and now is up to 150 acres. And that was a major negotiation point with stakeholders, with multiple stakeholder groups, and with several of y'all individually about the importance of having a conservation easement over these wetlands and restricting this site to a site that, as a logistics and distribution site with use restrictions like this being located next to it, is a substantially less intrusive end user as could potentially be there under the full I2 zoning. Those are the primary issues. The practical issues is these are city roads, and for a project to be built out there, there's going to have to be significant improvements to those city roadways. The estimates that we're working with now place those improvements at about a little under 15 million. It's anticipated those may go up to 16. And at this point, by entering this agreement, this $2 million for city roads will equate to about $16 million in improvements, because we'll be leveraging other dollars coming in from the county and from IPB and from the developer themselves, who are responsible for any of these improvements over that 6.5 million. Remember, these roads will be dedicated back to the city, so that the roads have to be built to city specs. So we're getting $16 million worth of improvements to city roads that will be deeded back for a $2 million investment. We're also getting a new light at the intersection of Commerce Park and Rangeline Road, which they have to pay for additionally, which the city would not have to pay for. So those are the practical aspects. As Mr. Daves alluded to, we talked about just briefly, just as a project overall, we're getting those transformational aspects. But to your question as to what the city's getting for any of this agreement, those are as practical as I can get in my response.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. But I think we're still going to get those things either way, in my opinion, without giving or paying this company $2 million to go down there. Amazon's breaking ground on a 225,000 square foot warehouse just down the road from this. They're not getting anything out of it. They're not. I mean, it's attractive enough for them to be here on their own accord. I mean, you think about the federal subsidizing, the state subsidizing of our port upstream that has supported this growth or desire or want to place a operation like this in our area. It's already been subsidized. You don't need the city to subsidize it additionally. I would also say that in regards to these infrastructure improvements, these city roads and stuff that we're going to end up, maintaining in perpetuity, there's a cost associated with that. But they're going to have to build those roads no matter what. If they want to build this facility out, they're going to have to build those roads with or without our money. And they're going to have to put a signalized intersection at Todd Acres Drive with or without our money. They're going to have to do it. I mean, And we're not going to just let them come down there and booger up our roads without investing in them. So they're going to have to do that anyways. In regards to the conservation easement, started off at, maybe it was 40 acres, originally proposed to me as 96 acres and a conservation easement that they said that they would do. And of that 96 acres of conservation easement, there was 40 acres that got taken out of it. But the wetland areas that they're putting in this conservation easement, they're wetland areas that their core permit does not allow them to touch no matter what anyways. So that's going to be protected by other means already. So, for it to be portrayed that we're getting some great big value about this. Now, they've added 40 acres or so to this latest deal that can be developed potentially in the future. But, I think it doesn't matter what, how big of a conservation easement you have. If you have somebody who's going to go down there and they're going to, put a coal handling facility or something, very egregious down there. I don't care how big your conservation easement, you're going to ruin the land, and you're going, an accident could happen, may very well happen, like we've seen at other plants. A rail car explodes with peroxide on it or whatever. And conservation easement isn't going to stop that. So I appreciate the work that Britton has done. I know he's been working his tail off trying to thread the needle for everybody involved, but it doesn't satisfy me because these use restrictions that are in this flimsy contract, that's not even signed, really don't mean a hill of beans as far as I'm concerned. We've got a process established for it. I do have one other question about this. I haven't seen this latest deal, but is the paragraph still in there forbidding this from being recorded in probate? Is that paragraph still in there?
Correct. There is a non-recordation provision,
What
as you
would be the
recall.
purpose of that? Why would any of us who are stewards of taxpayer money, affecting public policy, agree to forbid the document that is accepted from being recorded in probate? What would be the purpose of that?
The document itself is a public record, and once it's adopted, it is of record as an adopted resolution by the city of Mobile, so it is public. The issue that the company had is recording it in probate, such that it would show up on title policy and title work, and would, based on what the response that they've gotten back and been validated by potential purchasers, would make this site less desirable for a potential purchaser. And as you recall, that's what got us back here today, was the deed restrictions and how those were going to affect title, and how it was going to show up on the title report. So that's the only reason why it's not recorded. So it's not a matter of title or title insurance, but it is a matter of record. And as far as how that affects the process and the project, if we had gone forward with these as deed restrictions and there had been a violation, the methodology for enforcing those deed restrictions would be the exact same methodology we have now for violation of these use restrictions. Any violation of these use restrictions is considered an event of default. And the city, upon an event of default, or any of the parties, have remedies at both law and equity. So you'd have to bring a lawsuit to enforce the use restrictions and or recover the funds owed. The process for enforcing a deed restriction would have been the same process. You would have been a intended third-party beneficiary, or the party granting the original deed would have had standing to proceed with filing a lawsuit for inequity to enforce those deed restrictions. So the net result of the manner of enforcement is exactly the same. I'm not sure if I answered your question.
I think you did. What's the idea? Why would we restrict this to 20 years? I don't understand that. Why wouldn't it just be forever? See, that's another sticking point. Voluntary use restriction. If we were to go through the process that has been defined, that we have passed in our UDC and is firmly established, if we go through the voluntary use restriction process, this would be resolved in perpetuity rather than conceding to this enforcement mechanism that you just laid out. And then I don't understand why we'd further limit ourselves to only 20 years for these use restrictions. What's the purpose of limiting it to 20 years? Why wouldn't it be forever? Can you help me with that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to help you with that. I asked for that limitation because under what's in front of us, there was no term. I was afraid that someone could take the position that once the money was paid out, the contract, all the rest of it was no good. I asked for the 20 years to make it absolutely clear that there was a term to this contract, and after the money was paid out, that there were still obligations on the project developer with respect to this contract. Now, nothing lasts forever, and even the pyramids crumble. And I think that the thing will be built out in 20 years. And I just thought 20 years was a reasonable period of time to make it absolutely sure that the developer was on the hook for a period certain.
But everybody would probably agree that use restrictions that sort of run in perpetuity through, say, our voluntary use restriction process would be better. We can agree to that, right?
Look, we have, let's make this really simple. It's sitting out there I-2 today.
That's right.
Anyone can go out there and make use of it for I-2 purposes.
Correct.
What we've got in front of us is a limitation on that. We've got a limitation on that for 20 years. Those are the two choices. We can let it remain I-2, or we can do what's in front of us and restrict the uses for 20 years.
For $2 million.
For $2 million.
That's
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly
so
right.
we're
Plus,
fine with that.
plus making sure on the R1, plus the additional conservation easement. There are some reasons to do this. I think it's worth $2 million. Maybe you don't.
I don't think it's worth a dime from the taxpayer. I think it's a
So you just
flimsy deal, and it's not
prefer
even,
it to stay
si-
Y2. You
and
just
it-
want to stay I2.
and it's not even a signed deal. I mean, it's, bringing some, contract here. Like, we've already seen it. We've already been down this road, it's not even a signed deal. So I'll vote no today. I'd be happy to vote no.
Ms. Gregory, then Mr. Carroll.
Mr. Britton, since you're still standing up there.
I can sit down.
No, that's fine. Since this has not been signed, is it because we've gotten some new substitute language, or what is the reasoning?
This is typical of how we handle economic development projects. We get them approved. We require the other side to sign first, and then the mayor signs last.
So are we the other side, or are they the other side?
They're the other side.
They're the other
mayor
side.
the city signs last.
So if we agree on this today, then it goes to the company, they sign it, and then the mayor signs
I
it.
anticipate they will sign by the end of the week, and then the mayor will sign.
But if they don't agree, then we're just
Well,
still stuck.
we've had nothing for them to sign because nothing has been agreed upon by the council. So until we have a final agreement to present, there's nothing for them to sign.
But they are aware of the change
Yes.
language and the substitute.
Yes.
Mr. Carroll.
Is there any debt service by the owner on the property acquisition?
On the acquisition, yes, I believe there will be, and there will be debt service as well with regard to the individual building of each one of these buildings. Their intent is to either, some of them are going to be built spec, some will be built to suit lease back, some may be sold to the end user for construction. That's why we included, in addition to paragraph 22, for the certificate restrictions, we have an estoppel provision in there as well.
What's the length of debt service?
I don't have the term on that.
What's the term?
Kind of to be determined depending on which project it is, right? You got a 500,000 square foot building versus a 100,000 square foot building.
Who's responsible for the debt service?
The company.
The company.
Private equity.
So in essence, debt service could run longer than 20 years here, correct?
Correct.
All right. Joel, if you don't mind, I'd like to amend your statement or your amendment and use some language where the restrictions run with the length of debt service on the property or 20 years, whichever one's longer.
Each one's going to be different. for you.
Yeah, well, for the,
Each little parcel is going to be different.
well, yeah, I thought you just told me that the owner owns all of the property.
The owner is purchasing all the property, and the 5 million square feet of warehouse space will be based on the end users. They will be built to suit lease for some of them. They will be spec building for some, and for some, they will sell the dirt for the end user to construct the building.
Don't you think that we should have some type of protection out there for as long as there's some type of debt service being paid on the property when we only have a small investment in it, though? Our investment's only $2 million. So our protection needs to run at least for the length of the debt service or a term of 20, whichever one is longer.
So I'm going to tell you why you probably want to avoid that. The reason that lawyers typically pick that 20 years in the state of Alabama, because that 20 years has a trigger. And with this document not being recorded, you want to avoid that trigger. Two things, and I was going to say this after the meeting, but the reason that this agreement isn't in perpetuity, because as you know, any first-year law student will tell you, there's a rule against it, and it's called the rule against perpetuities. So and everybody hates it, but there's a rule against it. But that 20-year is a trigger for voidness. A great example is what happened with Bay Bear Stadium, right? That lease wasn't recorded within that 20 years. So this not being recorded, you may want to avoid that. This is not a lease, but it is a contract. You want it to run with that 20 years to avoid any confusion. So that gives us some protections, but you definitely want to avoid that with this not being recorded.
So what happens after the 20 years?
It could be developed.
It can be developed without any constraints from the city.
That's
Developed without any restraints tomorrow
right,
morning.
just like it could be right
I
now.
understand.
Right. So what we're purchasing is 20 years of development under these specific protections. Without that, it could be developed in any way, shape, or form tomorrow.
And the secondary use, secondary use, we're talking about the
Accessory use.
Well, I thought I read or talking about secondary use this morning with secondary purchases or secondary people using the property. Are the same restrictions or use restrictions and ancillary restrictions, are they automatically bestowed upon the secondary use?
That's right. They are assumed by the subsequent purchaser and or the user.
Is that noted?
Yes.
Mr. Penn.
Thank you, President Small. So the difference with the voluntary usage and the 20-year is basically that in 20 years they'll go back to I-2 and they can do basically whatever they want.
Same thing they do tomorrow. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. And then the difference with the not being recorded and in probate court, what's that? Well, it's not being recorded. What's the
non-recordation, it goes back to the marketability of the property based on the effect on title.
okay? So that's the reason why they don't want to.
Right. And I'll use this as a hypothetical, but when a FedEx is looking at pieces of property to locate on, they're going through a site selection process. So during that site selection process, the potential end users that are recruiting that business will produce a document in response to a white paper. And as part of that, you provide where the property is and any restrictions on that property. Typically, the first cut that any site selector does is he goes through and looks at the potential use restrictions, and anything that looks problematic, that site gets cut. So by having a use restriction in place on the title, it's the opinion of not only this developer, but the others that we've done due diligence with, is that this site would get struck immediately by certain users if they feel like their use could be triggered.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yes, sir, Mr. President.
Reynolds.
I want everybody to understand that we are not the only ones who could protect this area. There are other agencies and organizations that are firmly established to provide adequate protections for this property. It's not like it's the be-all, end-all is right here with the city of Mobile. You have the United States Army Corps of Engineers who has issued them a permit. And they can't just go do something different than their permit. So there are certain restrictions that are outlined in their permit. There is ALDOT that deals with traffic. There are federal organizations and other organizations that have, protections out there that they must adhere to make sure it's environmentally safe, whatever they do, regardless of what their zoning is. So for the suggestion to be they can go out there and do whatever they want, whenever they want it, unless we, give them $2 million to go out there and do it, is not true. It's not the truth. There are other protections that are in place that will protect this property and this watershed and the river. Even if we don't pay them to go out there and do it. And like I said before, the government has played its role in this process in that it has already made sure the port is operating effectively and efficiently. It's being deepened and widened, and the port has attracted great customers to the port, and which has created this demand over there. You don't need the government to prop up this new development any longer. They're already going to go make a bunch of money on doing it anyways. It's already attractive enough. I think taking $2 million and giving it to this project is, frankly, just throwing $2 million away. So that's where I'm at, Mr. President.
Bonner?
Yeah, the only, just for clarity's sake, there's only one governmental entity that regulates zoning on the site, and that is the city of Mobile. And the city of Mobile has zoned this I-2. And so if the city of Mobile wants to restrict the uses at this point, from a coal handling facility, for example, for the next 20 years, the only way that we can do that at this point is with these use restrictions.
I'm sorry. Well, we're not using the city's established process to do that. We're trying to pervert it into something else. And it's been tried to be perverted into something else since day one, where the goalpost has not moved on this. It has always been voluntary use restrictions. Oh, we didn't have time last time. Oh, we got to hurry up. We can't snag this project. So we should do a deed restriction. That's what was put forward to me. We got to do a deed restriction. If we would have just done it right the first time or the second time, then we wouldn't be here today. So you're right. The city of Mobile is in control of zoning. We're not really in control of zoning anymore because this property is I-2 now. But if we would just go through the voluntary use process that says exactly the same thing in this contract, we'd be fine. I'd vote in favor of this. So.
Madam Clerk?
08, 921, 922, 923, 924, 925, and 926 are approving purchase orders to Sansum Equipment Company for automated side load garbage truck, to Hall's Motorsports for utility vehicle, to Kane's Tree and Landscape to remove tree hazards on Old Shell Road, to Kane's Tree and Landscape to prune and remove trees on Cottage Hill Road, to Chris Francis Tree Care to prune and remove trees on Spring Hill Avenue, and to Priority Dispatch Corporation for annual renewal of emergency dispatch quality assurance software.
Mr. President, if when we're voting these 923 and 924, if you'll call those out separately, I'll be abstaining from those.
09, 927, authorized fiscal year 25 Rebuild Alabama allocation. 31, 928, authorize the mayor to apply, accept, and receive grant funds from the Alabama Department of Transportation for the Highway Safety Improvement Program. 50, 929, approved TEFRA bond financing for multifamily residential rental development located at 2001 Brill Road. 60, 930, request that the Planning Commission consider the rezoning of Lot 6 of Todd Acres Industrial Park subdivision.
Mr. President,
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
I'd prefer to table this. Again, I believe that this body has the ability to rezone once properly advertised, once walking through that. I'm going to be a no on this. I just think that interpretation, obviously it can be vague at times. And I just think this body has the ability to rezone a property after walking through the proper noticing. But that's where I'm at on this. And, end of the day, I know that there's been said, well, there's no check and balance if this is a real thing. But I would make the case that, yes, there is a check and balance. It comes every 4 years. And, sometimes when people resign or quit, it comes sooner. So I would say there is a check and balance. So that's just where I stand. I think we have the authority, once done properly, walking through the proper noticing, and but that's where I stand. So.
City Attorney.
So, Mr. President, want to point out a couple of things in this particular one. So the mechanics are also important. Mr. Linder and our teams, we probably spend half of our time finding solutions to get to yes, and the other half walking through what is probably sometimes well-intentioned, but a bad idea. So with this one in particular, give you a good example. We're re-advertising. We have to go back and fix that one because the full advertisement and the summation were advertised on the same day. And then there were typographical errors going forward. We want to prevent those types of things mechanically. Not saying I have no opinion whatsoever publicly on Mr. Linder's legal opinion. What I'm talking about is how we do things properly and in order and giving due process. And there's some mechanics in that Mr. Rossler referenced. We've been trying to fix this one since April. The reason that you typically want to send it back to the Planning Commission is because of those mechanics dealing with due process. The actual staff, planning staff, along with not only Planning Commission, going through the steps of advertising, posting, making sure not only the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed, but the J's are dotted too. And so we don't have that capability in any other department to do that, to give that kind of due process. So with this one in particular, because it was so off the rails, you probably want to send it back to the Planning Commission just for belt and suspenders approach going forward. And that's, that's my advice, as to not create a problem that doesn't already exist. And I'm not, like I say, agreeing or disagreeing with the legal opinion rendered. I'm talking about this one in particular.
Mr. Days.
Yeah, I'm kind of perplexed. We've had some really good lawyers telling us we need to do this, and we've had some really good lawyers suggesting that we don't need to do it. There seems to be a diversity of legal opinion, and so my perplexity is not as to that, because lawyers can disagree just like anybody else can.
Sure.
My perplexity is why we would not send this back to remove all doubt. Otherwise, we leave it open to someone to come along and challenge it later on down the road when we have less ability to affect it than we do now.
And that's your legal opinion? Attorney Days.
From another attorney, right?
Mr. President,
Ms. Reynolds.
I think everybody's in agreement that this should be R1, and I don't disagree with the various legal opinions. Belt and suspenders approach may be what's best. This is really just about simply a balance of power. That's really what it is. It's a balance of, fortunately, we work together pretty well, but this is a balance of having the city recognize that we, in fact, have this authority and ability. It's a new discovered authority and ability for many of us in the UDC, as it has been outlined in Mr. Linder's opinion, but the city has not recognized this, and I'm curious as to why they have not, and maybe it is because of the notice issues. Maybe that is the crux of it, but is that what it is? Is it the city is not recognizing this rezoning in their, say, packets that they submitted to the Planning Commission? So this thing went up for subdivision in this process, again, by the way, and in the materials that were put forward to the entire board did not represent this property being rezoned as we had already done from B5 down to R1, which leads me to believe that the city is not recognizing as a result of us taking this newfound action. So is that the case?
No. That's not the case. So as Mr. Rossler explained, there were two problems that have nothing to do with the authority. All right, that's a completely separate private conversation that the lawyers can have. What we're talking about in particular is the advertisement in itself, and the clerk's office and Mr. Linder can probably echo this, is the advertisement wasn't done correctly because both advertisements were in the same paper, right, in the same periodical. So that's one problem. But the secondary issue is the rezoning didn't actually go to R1, right? It says it's getting rezoned. The actual advertisement says it's getting rezoned to what it already stands at now. So those are the two problems that we're fixing, and you all talked about last week can be fixed. What we're talking about something separate and apart from that when you talk about authority. Ultimately, I'm going to tell you, the power to zone and rezone, it always rests with the governing body. Planning Commission doesn't do anything but make recommendations to you all. If it comes to you all from the Planning Commission, you're the final say. 100%, there's no doubt on that. You have to say yay or nay when it comes to zoning. We can disagree and agree about initiation one time out of 100, but 100 times out of 100, Mr. Linder and I are going to both say that the governing body is the end all, be all, last say on zoning. That's you have the ultimate power when it comes to zoning. And there's no doubt about that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. I understand what Mr. Reynolds is saying. I would just suggest that this should not be the test case. This should not be the test case. This is not a corner gas station. This is a really important piece of property that we need to take down to R1.
Mr. Carroll.
Well, Mr. Davis, and I agree right here. We just had that conversation. I think I had it along this line right here. I do believe that Mr. Reynolds is right in this case, but this isn't a good one.
Madam Clerk.
Consent resolutions being introduced. 37-933, recommend approval to the ABC Board for issuance of a retail beer table off-premises only license to STA Mart on Dolphin Island Parkway. 37-934, recommend approval to the ABC Board for issuance of a retail beer table wine off-premises only license to Dollar General Store on Dolphin Island Parkway. 37-935, recommend approval to the ABC Board for issuance of a restaurant retail liquor license to El Rincon Tacos and Margaritas on South University Boulevard. 03-948, appoint John Valientis to the Mobile City County Youth Council. CIP resolutions being introduced. 01-936, authorize agreement with J. Hunt Enterprise General Contractors for field improvements at Mims Park, $294,650. 01-937, authorize agreement with P.L. Russell for structural retaining wall and grading improvements at Langham Park, $241,405.
Got a quick question about that. Is Cassie here? I'm just wondering, you may not even have to come up. Is that the wall over by the theater, the amphitheater? Okay, just want to make sure.
Resolutions being introduced. 08-938, approved purchase order to Dana Safety Supply for upfitting Chevrolet Tahoes and Ford pickup trucks for Mobile Police Department, $150,874.30. 08-939, approved purchase order to Diesel Services for fire truck replacement engines, $104,364.68. 08-940, approved purchase order to Long Lewis Ford of the Shoals for 2025 Ford Escape for Bill Mobile, $28,784.50. 08-941, approved purchase order to Vulcan Construction Materials for limestone base for Hertel Street parking, $55,200. 09-942, transfer funds from Capital Project Gulf Coast Tech Center Intelligence to Project MCPS Student Safety Analyst to be used to support a student safety analyst, $90,000. 13-943, authorized change order number 1 with John G. Walton Construction Company for 2018 Pago, North McGregor Avenue.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Could I get a little more information on the student safety analyst?
942.
About 2 years ago, the Mobile County Public School gave us $180,000 in 2 separate payments. The $90,000 we're talking about was just put in the wrong account, and we want to put it back into the right account.
So this money came from the school
Correct.
system. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Penn and Ms. Gregory.
No, no.
I'm-
I'm
Yeah,
good.
yeah,
I
it was,
just had the
yeah, it was
same
a question about
yeah.
the, and so, and what was it for? Like in the beginning, what is?
So we're to hire as it says, a student safety analyst. This person will work in the high schools with the higher rate of crime and suspensions and try to establish bonds one-on-one with the individual students and try to create a better atmosphere for them and work with the family intervention team and our other prevention stuff.
Okay, so this person would be hired through the city of Mobile.
Correct,
and be a
but paid
partnership
for
with the-
with the funds from the Mobile County Public Schools.
Okay.
21-944, authorize contract with McCory and Williams for Shipyard Road Boat Launch, $195,090. 21-945, correct resolution 21-748, 2024, to reflect the cost share is between the city and the Federal Highway Administration. 31-946, authorize the mayor to apply, accept, and receive a grant from the South Alabama Regional Planning Commission for the fiscal year 25 Transportation Alternative Grant Program, $100,000 local match.
Mr. President.
Ms. Woods.
It was asked, our discussion that I had with Public Safety Director, 08939. I know it's above and doesn't really, meet what our normal procedure when waiving the rules to take it. But I just want to know if there would be this one time that we could waive the rules, take that. It's regarding the replacement of 2 engines on 2 pumper trucks that are down for the fire department.
08839?
08939.
08939?
And it's, replacement of existing engines and a 2018 pumper, and I believe the other one's a 2016, and then there was 8 bids, and this was the
So you're asking for
08939.
Am I looking at the right one?
Yes.
Yeah. Fire truck replacement engines. So it's 104,000.
Oh, and it's for 2 pumper truck engines.
Okay. Anybody object to waiving the rules to voting on this today? Okay.
Call for public hearings. 41-947, call for public hearing to consider the application of Care Ride Transport to operate a sedan service scheduled for October 15th. Announcements.
Mr. President, before we finish with this, can we go back to 21-945, Nick, I'm sorry, not that one. 943 on North McGregor. This is just the contract. We already did the easement, so this is just a contract for them to do the work. Right, okay.
Ms. Reynolds.
I guess this is just a general public service announcement here. We've seen tremendous amount of flooding that has happened throughout our country, all throughout the Carolinas, Georgia, Florida. And I think what we're going to find out, we'll see, is that many folks that were, say, in these mountains didn't have flood insurance. And a lot of folks say, why would I ever have flood insurance? It's up on a mountain. Well, I suspect that the premium on flood insurance for these areas probably was pretty cheap. But I want to encourage everybody that is in Mobile County. Flooding is not getting better. It is increasing. If you're in a flood zone or not, I encourage you to explore the possibilities of buying flood insurance. We have areas that are susceptible, and we've identified them through the federal government, locally, and everything else in our floodplain management program. And that's the best guess that they can come up with, 100-year, 500-year floodplain. But it happens just about every single year that people lose everything as a result of flooding in areas that are not identified within the 100 or 500-year floodplain. So I encourage everyone out there to explore the option of obtaining flood insurance. Thank you, Mr. President.
Anyone else from the council? Anything from the administration? Okay. All right, see each other at 10:30.